Please welcome Richard to the show this evening. Hi, Richard. You there?
He's here.
You're here.
Little thing out of yeah, they're here.
You're no Carol Ann. How's it going over there?
Well, it's good. Everything's
okay.
I'm should now, but I'm. Huh?
You're just breaking up a little bit. Maybe you need to get a little bit closer to the mic.
No, I've had some trouble with Skype recently. I'm wondering why.
Yeah, it's weird because we were fine when we were talking off air.
Yeah, of course we are. But then, that's when the hackers come in and they do their thing, huh?
You're just so popular, Richard. I don't know what to say anymore.
Get a grip. I'm not popular. I'm credible. That's problem.
What it is.
Everybody out there.
All right, well, let's start rolling things here.
Full. Okay.
Okay, and I hope I have to reconnect you, but let's just go ahead and see what happens here. So tell me about what's happening here on the timeline insofar as what we need to be really concerned about. Let's start there.
Well, in what time frame? Fukushima, GMOs, chemtrails, or do you want to get into the bigger picture?
I want to get into the bigger picture. Those are all distractions. They are critical, yes, but we need to talk about the bigger scenery behind it all.
So geoengineering is the primary effort is to stop an event or try to stave off or stall an event that should have already happened. Right now, this moment in Antarctica, it's 64 degrees, and Greenland's icebergs are melting so quickly that we're going to have a day after tomorrow. It is impossible not to. What is causing all of this heating up on Earth? Is it man? No, it's not. It's actually an object coming in off of elliptic out near Neptune. NASA has confirmed Planet 7X. It comes through our solar system every 3,600 years. It resulted in such things as Noah's flood and other events. The Clovis culture, which is our American Indian, have cave pictures of the sun blowing up and then them crawling out of a cave. What this means is an event that will be very close to the day after tomorrow. The oceans are going to most likely rise up to about 60 meters. I will be posting tomorrow more interesting maps on what the geography is going to look like before Nibiru. And even before Nibiru, we're going to have some climatic, volcanic action that's going to change some geography. But when the planet itself goes through the solar system, it's going to wreak havoc on our gravitational and spin axis. And we're going to shift axis. And how badly? Nobody really knows. That's where a lot of the space program has gone up into space to actually take a look. Mm-hmm. It's mostly in the infrared, so that's why a lot of the astronomers, there are astronomers now that are starting to notice the object. There are graphs of its elliptic orbit, and we can actually calculate the size and mass of this entity because of orbital changes in Neptune and Uranus. It is approximately 5.5 times the size of Earth. It is way more massive for the diameter. That means it's probably made out of nickel and other kinds of heavy metals, probably. And it is heating up the sun. In fact, everything that happens on Earth is a direct result of what the sun does, not what man does. It would be nice to think that we're causing all of this global mess, but actually, in fact, the sun is. And it has been known for some time that geoengineering, or at least one element of geoengineering, is about holding off the climatic changes like from the movie The Day After Tomorrow. Probably frost lines will form all the way down to Texas. The bugging out period looks like money is going to Costa Rica. That isn't going to work. Volcanoes are going off crazy down there right now because of the mass changes that are going on. Bugging in, you're going to have at least 10 feet of soil between you and the Earth. And even if you do, you'll be down there for 2 or 3 weeks. Then the ocean currents will reboot and things will start to warm up again. The problem is when you come above the surface, everything will be under snowpack for at least 2 years. And everything down to 10 feet will be dead, including seed, mycorrhiza, and all the soil organisms and anything. The temperatures will probably reach those enjoyed on Mars, minus 100 Fahrenheit.
Okay, so what kind of time? Okay, go ahead.
Well, what kind of timeline? Nobody knows. We think Nibiru, the planet X, will probably poke its head where it's visible to Earthlings, probably in 2017.
Okay, you're looking at 2017, not the end of this year or anything like that.
The end of this year will show some minor artifacts as a result of that, one of which will be the currency. I think we'll see some collapse in gold and other kinds of precious metals and money. I think several banks are going to fail. I think it'll be like the savings and loan situation. But in terms of, Jade Helm and all the rest of it, these are practicing for getting ready for a near extinction event. Mm-hmm. And it will be like going from Atlantis to Greece. And the problem is that if we don't dismantle the nuclear power plants before this event occurs, there will be nothing left on Earth when things thaw. And when I say that, it will be like what Matt Stein, my buddy Matt, wrote on 400 Chernobyls. We don't realize that Fukushima has no solution yet. They have just today, I saw posts on the pictures of Reactor 2 when the robot died because the radiation levels are so high inside that chamber that the electronics are just crapped out. Ionizing radiation from Fukushima alone has now created another Van Allen belt, if you will. That means there is even a less likely chance of going into space you'll ever be able to have babies. And that going through the Van Allen belt is one thing. Going through this ionized layer of plutonium and cesium-137 is almost impossible. And every once in a while, some of that particulate drops down. And there is the Nuclear Emergency Tracking Center, the netc.com, that will give you RADCON level 3, RADCON level 4 alerts, like in your area right now. Japan is lit up like a candle. I would say that almost everybody in Japan is toxic and dead.
Right.
That's how bad it is as a physicist. Gunderson, others are trying to, bring this concept to the public to realize that how can a mafia-like organization, the Yakuza, handle cleanup when the technology doesn't even exist yet? Mm-hmm. And we're talking about a serious event here with Fukushima, and now there is some indication that other reactors fell off the grid in Japan when Fukushima went down. And so that there were other anomalies that were not reported to the public. And now with all of this, we have this artifact that is historically right on schedule. And here it is. And here are pictures and da-da-da-da-da. And yet, none of us really know. Some of the other cultures before ours actually had technologies that were more advanced than ours in some ways. And that's why we see things like the temples and, pyramids, things of that nature. I just was looking at some bracelets that came from 4,500 years ago, 45,000 years ago, and 45,000 years ago. And the drilling of a hole in it indicated a high-speed drill that we don't even have technology for yet. That quality of amendment, artistic makemanship. It was exceptional. And we watch how these stones were built for pyramids, and we're now starting to realize there were other cultures that had other technologies. And the problem is our particular technology is such that it's going to leave an artifact where nothing human will be able to survive on Earth after the cataclysm occurs. The Day After Tomorrow movie actually had survivors. And there will be survivors, just like there always has been. And there are, other places like Mars that most likely have seed of humanity on it now. But I am very concerned because you don't turn a reactor off, literally. You have to dismantle it. And it's one thing for the grid to turn it off and keep it cool. It's another thing then to dismantle it so that it can't become more active should and if a grid collapses.
Right. That's a good point you make there. So what about if this thing's coming in from outside? You said Saturn. Obviously, it's affecting other planets, right?
There's global warming on Venus. There's global warming on Mars, and there's global warming on Pluto.
Okay, so it is affecting other environments.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. There's absolutely no question. And there's a lot of disinformation in the little black dot next to the sun. Some of that are artifacts in the way a camera is worked. However, there is absolutely no question that something massive is entering our solar system and has been known for more than 200 years. Anthropology, archaeology have pictures of here's the object on the cave wall and why they went in the cave in the first place and when they came back out. And so there is a history of it. There's an excellent book I'm reading right now called The Seventh Planet, Mercury Rising by Gerald Clark. I'm in contact with him. He's one person that has actually done some homework he's an engineer. He's not a deep scientist, but he's a very well researched individual. And that material is even better than Sitchin and more complete. And I'm looking at other reports from other directions as well. There's no question from my limited pay grade, if that's the right word to put it, that would suggest that we're all about to go through a near extinction event with man.
It certainly sounds that way. Well, it also sounds like this particular, whatever you want to call it Planet X, it sounds like it's under intelligent control. It also sounds like it's not necessarily a planet, that it might be something else, maybe a space station, a mothership of some kind. What's your impression of that?
Probably my best guess again is it is a dead, collapsed binary. Okay. And that's my best guess because it's 5.5 times and it's much more massive. Now, the other bad news, the third shoe falling after the Ice Age, the grid collapsing. Now you have water and anarchy in the streets with food and zombies. And then you have a pole shift from this planet coming through, and it pulls such way as to alter the pole of Earth, and that will shift and collapse a whole bunch of coastlines. Now, the third shoe is that this artifact has a huge debris trail behind it of ice particles. And so while we won't be hit by this planet or anything like that, we absolutely are going to get pelted by ice. And the near calculations show it looks like the Earth will go through it twice. That over a 2-year period, in our revolution around the sun, it will go through this debris. That's how big a debris trail it is. So we're talking about biblical things. And the problem that I'm having with all of this is I'm a pretty smart polymath who makes the decision that I don't need to know because I would be fearful. I'm smarter than anybody I know. Now, who has the right to make a decision for what I should know and not know to protect myself?
Well said.
Okay, we moved to page 2 on that, and we realized that CERN is basically a time machine. It's a time portal. And they're creating the God particle and dark matter. And they are trying to create what we call a singlet mini black hole. And with that said, it's weird to realize that, and that's why I posted Michael Aquino and Temple said, it's important to realize that there within all high-end bureaucracies is an occult element. And CERN is no different. And CERN has a group of, I don't know what they are, fanaticists that are trying to bring on biblical prophecy. And if they open that door to Apollo, I mean, really, my background in the occult, I don't know anybody as strong as mine. However, I called my daughter the other day and asked her for the Eye of Agamotto. I have an heirloom in my family tree that goes back, I don't know how many generations. My great-grandfather, for sure, passed it on to my grandfather. My grandfather gave it to my father. My father gave it to me. I gave it to my daughter. And now I've asked for it back as a, I don't know, an artifact that I wear as part of my being. It's it's a triangle with a lapis lazuli. The center of the lapis has gold, not pyrite in it, boiling through like an eye. And it's called the all-seeing eye. And it's been in my family tradition for, well, at least 5 generations I know of. It's old. It's Mars and Mars and Venus at the bottom for male and female, and culminating to Jupiter or judgment, the blending or androgyny. And that's what I'm trying to do now, is be a magician. I didn't think I would ever need to wear this again, and I just put it on today.
So is it more of a psychic shield for you, Richard? What are you doing with this?
Well, you know, Dion Fortune. Read Dion Fortune.
Oh, I know Dion Fortune. I've read it. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, she's the one that about surrounding white light. Actually, the ritual is in your mind's eye. And once you've done that part of it, you have your protection. It's always nice to have a physical analog, like a Smith & Wesson. There you go. Magic is at the end of a Smith & Wesson. That's real magic. And so, you know, it has a medical, physical metaphor.
Mm-hmm. I love lapis lazuli anyways. So let's talk a little bit about the door to Apollo. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, what that entails?
Well, Saturn, the idea of the destroyer, Enlil, the two brothers, the creator, our creator deity, and the one that wanted to limit humanity. This is a classic out of the Colburn Bible that Matthew, the apostle, wrote about. And you can get more detail. There are downloads on the Colburn Bible from many different sources worth reading. I don't know the truth. This is not my area of expertise. However, I am coming up to speed. There is, I don't care what anybody says, there is something coming into our solar system. I've seen the NASA documents. And so what it is, I have no idea yet. It's large, and it is affecting the outer orbitals, and it is causing our sun to heat up. And everything that happens on Earth is directly related to the sun. We can enhance it a little bit with our carbon romance, with electricity and things like that, but it's not us doing this. It's the sun. And Antarctica at 64 degrees today, that's creepy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Well, we're having a interesting storm right now, winter storm.
Well, that's right. The weather is changing everywhere. Mm-hmm. It's going to never be the same.
Well, it certainly seems like the planet's not going to be the same. I mean, it's definitely morphing through some kind of a process. Now, some of that is geoengineering, and somebody can attribute to mankind and his negligence. And other things that what you're talking about now, I don't discount what's happening as far as something coming in. I'm wondering why nothing's ever being said about this until the last minute. Is it that they, really don't want to worry anybody, or are they just trying to, suck the life force out of everybody?
Yeah, it's like in that movie, what was it, 2012, mm-hmm. where that guy in the White House said it's for your own good.
I'll be the judge.
The bottom line is, he has no right to say that about me because I'm smarter than he is.
You're right.
And
yes.
because, who makes those decisions for me?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, divine right. That is where Liber Oz comes into effect, and I'm just formal warning to the universe, because I am a magician, and if my rights as a human being, my natural rights are being violated, I have a right to do something about it.
Absolutely, you do. Everybody does. That's the bottom line. I noticed they're trying to put more spikes around the D.C. White House now. It seems to me like they're trying to kind of keep themselves, almost box themselves in.
Wire.
It's working the opposite way. It's almost like they have to box themselves in from everybody else. It makes you wonder what they're doing wrong, doesn't it?
There's a lot of things. When I was in Indianapolis with Matt Stein, I stayed over in Springfield, and wait till you see the caverns there. I mean, we're talking about a lot of deep bunkers everywhere right now in place. And you can read the articles about people bugging in, the 1%ers. I'm just going to say it's not going to work.
Right.
Because the gravitational shift from this planet X, 7X, is going to wreak havoc on everything. There's going to be mantle changes. And that's like 100 miles of soil going straight down into the earth, going to move around.
Which means the underground bases would be compromised.
Everything's going to be compromised. That's the whole deal. And you don't have any knowledge on what survives or not. And how do you feel about the 1%ers that did bug in as your new gene pool?
Well, that's almost pathetic. But what goes around comes around on so many different levels. You know that.
Well, guess what? That's why they're running around like scurrying rats. There's a lot of fear out there.
There should be.
Nobody really knows how bad it is.
Right. Well, I think they should be afraid because they've been playing the manipulators for a very long time, and it's now time for them to kind of pay up. And I think that, the universe has a way of balancing the score, and maybe this is a blessing in disguise if this is really what's going on. It might be a way to just kind of clear out all the debris and the deception that's been going on for century after century after century. I mean, unfortunately, it takes a mass extinction event, Richard. It takes something like this for people to what? Pull it together, get it together, or are they going to be a bunch of zombies?
I watched a video of a bunch of engineers at CERN doing a ritual in the center of their platform, which appeared like ghost dance. And I have to wonder what that's all about. Trying to bring on biblical prophecy with the entrance or reemergence of Apollo. And the Greek actually named all the gods in the pantheon. And there were 22 of them, or paths or energies of man. And this Apollo has also been known as the destroyer, Kali. And so it's all part of our mythology. And really, once you step back and look at the whole thing, you realize that what we have in front of us is an opportunity to change things from the way they were to the way they should be. This would be like going from capitalism and communism into communalism. I remember when I remember when I grew up in Seattle and everybody learned, Washington history. And we had an Indian, Chief Sealth, also known as Chief Seattle. And in 1857, he said, how can man own the land he lives on? How can he own the air he breathes? We're only here for a brief moment. We are caretakers for our children. And so I think there's going to be a change in our value systems, and that will lead to a different direction in technologies. I was talking to you earlier about the concepts of sound and dance and how they can change space-time. These are old technologies that the Germans and others were always interested in. The Germans knew it wasn't about alien technology. It was about previous civilizations' technology. They could do things we can't. How does that work?
Right. Exactly. Well, you're interesting. You touched on something a little bit there about being the caretakers, and I totally agree with that. I think that somewhere mankind has lost his way insofar as what his position is here on this timeline in the illusion of living on a planet. But also, even if people were to be wiped out, so to speak, in the illusion of extinction, they're still going to go on a continuation. They're still going to be on a journey through consciousness and moving on. So maybe people have outgrown the vibration of this world and the illusions to a point where it's time to move on. What's your take on that?
I had the rare opportunity when I studied under James Hillman to meet and be able to take some courses from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And then last year I was in the jungles with Eben Alexander and his wife. He wrote a book called Proof of Heaven. And I absolutely am now convinced that there is something beyond death, that life as we experience it here on Earth is like a dream. There is a movie I've talked about previous that I can't say enough about because it helped me process my father's death, called Astral City. And that movie is it's Portuguese, so you need English subtitles. You can get it on Vimeo and or several other places. It's about a medical doctor that watches himself die on an operating table as a witnessing situation, and then what happens next. And it's non-denominational, but it suggests that we're all from the future, and that this place here, this moment, these lessons are things that we wanted to include in our learning curve. I don't know how that all works. It's a metaphor. And at our level of awareness, of course, imagination is reality.
Well said. No, I do agree with that. I did have a question for you real quick about this. I know we touched base. I don't want to backtrack, but I do want to cover one thing.
That's fine.
We talked a little bit about the underground bases, and so far as now, it's my impression that if this is really going on with this Nibiru, or whatever you want to call it, connecting and coming in, wouldn't it make sense to evacuate the underground bases with the military personnel, leave a skeleton crew, and bilocate everybody off with the Black Space program?
I don't know what they know and why they do what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. So I was just wondering if you had any insight on that. Go ahead.
I can tell you that moving to Costa Rica, like a lot of people are, isn't going to be any safer.
I agree. So what's your intuition tell you? What does your gut tell you? Do you think they might have broken away and that and it's my impression that a lot of those underground areas have actually been evacuated and actually have skeleton crews.
They are suggesting that. I don't know. I can tell you that my bunker is full, because I was out there a couple of weeks ago. We have a greenhouse out on Evans Creek up about mile 17 that it's 258 feet. It's aquaculture. It uses a flat method rather than vertical and has sodium lamps. And that system, 258 feet, had a throughput of 50,000 heads of lettuce every day, 24/7. It gets weirder.
Nice.
Then the military sent me out to Lost Creek and the Lost Creek Reservoir and the fish hatchery out there that has been abandoned for 20 years. And I took stock on it, and guess what? The fish hatchery today is in full production. They even had pools of 3-year-old salmon ready for release, and Holy Water was pulling out 35-foot salmon by fly fishing. That just last week. That facility at Lost Creek Dam is enough protein to feed the entire state of Oregon right now. In other words, we have the technology to take salt water and convert it into fresh water with a simple filter. We have sources of food infrastructured in local regions. And what we're doing now is setting up sustainable lifeboats. I have no idea. Every day, my learning curve includes something weirder, like an ice ball hitting the earth. And I don't know what to say about all of it, because my lifeboat changes design every day.
Right, and that's good because everything is in flux and unstable, so that makes perfect sense. Yeah, you have to accommodate the frequency at hand, I guess, is the point. Now, I'm also looking at the moon insofar as the lunar bases, if they even supposedly have them. But literally, obviously, the moon will be affected. Whatever comes in is going to affect the moon. There's no doubt about that.
I think the moon is going to get lost in the.
I agree. And when that happens, you know what's going to happen to the pole, obviously ebb and flow of the tides and everything else that goes on. So you can look at it from a very big perspective and see how this can be very devastating on so many different levels.
Well, what does the moon symbolize in astrology?
Well, it's divine feminine, definitely.
It symbolizes your subconscious.
Mm-hmm, true.
Your inner body. And if it's lost, what would that mean to humanity archetypally? And so there are metaphors in the way to look at what's going on. Mars has already, basically, when this event goes through, there is a likelihood that Earth will become and look very similar to Mars. Mm-hmm. It'll have a lot of pockmarks. It will have sand that's dead. There is no organisms because everything was frozen solid beyond anything. Temperatures will drop 10 degrees per second down to minus 100 Fahrenheit. It'll be just like the movie The Day After Tomorrow. That is possibly the most accurate scientific explanation of how an life extension, an extinction event might occur with an ice age. And we've had many ice ages.
True. Let me ask you something real quick. With this quote-unquote Planet X, Nibiru, whatever you want to call it, supposedly, now what if it changes everything in a not necessarily devastating level or on a devastating level? What if it turns this planet into an ascending star, something more ascension-oriented, more in alignment with light body and consciousness and higher design? What if it's not going to be what people think it's going to be on a devastating scale, when it's going to be more in alignment with the higher spectrums? What do you think about that? Do you think that's a possibility?
Well, the problem I have with that is Fukushima and all the Daiichi-like radiation plants sitting all over the world. Mm-hmm. Page 2 on that is there were cultures that I think achieved higher consciousness than this particular one, like Greece. Mm-hmm. And so they had technologies, and they had the Socrates, and they had the metaphor and the idea of archetype. And so I have to tell you that I don't think our particular culture is that enlightened. No. Compared to other civilizations that have existed previously.
I agree, but I think that along the way they've lost the cellular recall. They've lost that consciousness. Somehow they've lost it through programming, entrainment, and all the crap that's being basically, bombarding them since they were born onto the planet.
That's true. Basically, we have a situation with global mind control as the primary, trying to put everything into a similarity box. I look at autistic children and I don't say dysfunction at all, because that autistic child can actually do a bedding plant better than a master gardener. How does that work? And that child loves like a dog loves. What's wrong with that? That child has far more empathic response than anything normal children do. Why would we want to think there's something wrong with that child? What's wrong with that thinking?
Right. Very true. I have a question here from Steve Travesty. He says hello, by the way. And he wants to ask you, he wants to say, he wants to know if Planet X is changing all the orbits, etc., which means, or perhaps astrology, the astrological calendar is useless. Is that correct?
Now, I don't know that it's changing astrology as much as orbital changes are subtly being changed. And yes, they are being altered. That is correct. To what extent? Stay tuned.
Right. Same bat channel.
I don't know. Yeah. Same bat channel, same bat time.
Well, you have to have a sense of humor through a lot of this, but at the same time, you see the progressions of what's happening here from A to Z.
Well, so we have a moment. It's time for us to reach down and change the complacency and begin taking our first steps toward enlightenment. Our children are watching us, and while we may not make it, our children, are like essentially mini-me's of us. It's a reproduction of me and my ex-wife, and there she is. And her decision-making in terms of being a pedophile, a gambler, a drug addict, all of those are taught by the parent. And so it's time to, walk or talk. And while each of us is walking and talking a little differently than the other, that's God's will.
Right.
And the scheme of things is necessary because of our limited nature of consciousness.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. Well, we're definitely in for a big ride, whatever it is, obviously. And of course, I think we're actually overdue for something major, to be honest with you.
Well, that's what the geoengineering was all about, is to try to stop global warming as quickly as it has been, reflecting, sunlight back. And it turns out down here in Grants Pass, we were hammered today. And all of those aircraft came from Chicxulub, where is that? up in Canada, there's a place up in Canada where all the aircraft are coming from. In other words, it's not a United States event or project. It's a United Nations one. Mm-hmm. And there's a bunch of things going on with the United Nations that's kind of creepy. So I don't know what it all means yet.
They're all creepy anyway. I mean, that's the bottom line. There's nothing good about them. There's no doubt about that. There's a question here from the chat that Verbailey asks if, please ask Dr. Miller if he's aware of this. It's obviously a website of some kind, Pole Shift.
I'm opening it right now.
Okay, yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not.
Earth changes in the Pole Shift. Is this Mike Mandeville?
I have no idea.
Mike Mandeville is a very good friend of mine. He lives down in Phoenix, has Earth Changes, and does the Edgar Cayce site now. And I grew up with Mike, and he has a thing called Earth Changes. Earth Changes pending pole shift. That's Dr. Bert Bolin, University of Stockholm, Sweden, is talking about a pole shift. The Koryak and other natives up in that region of the pole have already said there's been a shift, and you can actually measure it from space. It is moving towards Siberia. It's slow, and I believe that Nibiru will cause it to jerk into position. And when it does that, there will be geographic situations. Mm-hmm. Now, Zeta Talk and some of this other stuff, I don't know much about that part.
No, I've heard of Zeta Talk, and I have no resonance with it.
That's Mike Mandeville.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's good. Well, like I said before, I think everybody needs to hold on for the ride. I suspect we're going to go in through a dark tide and then be able to ride it out in one form or another, whether it's through this embodiment or another one. So that's the way I see it. And what I do see is that I think it's every man for himself insofar as these corporations, which are quote-unquote governments and religions go. They're not going to go and look out for anybody. You know that. So literally people do need to take their power back and start making plans, not in a paranoid sense, but in a sense of just being prepared on so many different levels and really learning how to navigate and work with the universal flow instead of what's going on here.
The Greek had a word for that. It was called autarch, A-U-T-C-H-A-R, A-U-T-A-R-C-H, autarch. And it means supreme individual sovereignty. And while that is a goal, it is not a final product. What it is a process where you constantly are moving toward the door. Simon says you can go halfway to the door. And each time you do that, you get closer to the door, but it is not the door that is the goal. It is the journey of that. And so if you understand that concept of art as a process, it's not a final product, then I think you start with water and trying to make certain that you have 3 days of water on hand for everyone in the household, and then a game plan on how to replace that water the first day. That's a good place to start. Mm-hmm. The second place to start would be to start your grow, marijuana, or your food, or your garden of flowers, whatever. Starting toward something where your goal is to possibly be able to eat 40% of the food you eat came from off your own land. That would be a good goal. If you could do that and be able to have your water together, there is a high likelihood the rest of what you needed to do could be in barter. Last week, a good friend of mine brought in a working loom from Seattle, a big one. And what we're doing is putting a small field of hemp down below so we can make our clothing.
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea.
Well, it's a goal. And that's what we need to begin this process, is slowly, one step at a time. The first step is usually always the most important one because it's the one that ends complacency.
Right. Let me ask you something real quick here, Richard. I know being a magician like you are, obviously very psychic, have you ever thought of, and maybe you haven't, or has anybody else thought of connecting telepathically with this artifact, whatever it is, Nibiru, Planet X, whatever it is, and actually try to remote view it? I know I haven't, but I probably could take a look at it. Any information on that? And also, have we received any radio transmissions?
I haven't approached it from that point of view. I'm watching CERN try to do it.
Okay, so how are you watching? Go ahead.
Well, CERN is like opening up a door to something from the other side. And that's kind of creepy from a physics point of view alone.
Okay, so can you elaborate on that? You said they were doing some kind of a ghost dance. Is there some kind of a?
I have a video I can send to you.
Okay.
Will show these guys doing a dance very similar to that found in Whirling Dervish in their fourth movement. When I was younger and worked for the military, they sent me to Turkey to study Whirling Dervish and how they could do their sword fighting without any wounds. And the precision of that. And so one of the things I did is I went into the Bennett School of Gurdjieff and went through that training. And then we set up a thing called the Menninger Foundation in Topeka, Kansas, where we studied a phenomena called Jack Schwartz. He was able to stick needles through his arm and stop the bleeding with his mind. You don't think the military wanted to know how that worked. And what I discovered is in the fourth stage of dance in the Whirling Dervish, there is a precision in their movement that is a 9-6-3 geometry that is precisely the same geometry found in a rodent coil, free energy. And so I'm left with the concept that in the Book of Formation, the Sefer Yetzirah, the relating sound to words and how sound can change space-time, that was one of the Bibles. Basically, we have a similar concept happening with movement and the form of dance. And I've seen it with Mukumba and the Obi-Men. I have seen it with Whirling Dervish. I have seen it with American Indian and what was called ghost dance. And they go into a trance state where the movement has a geometry to it that changes space-time. And it would reflect a type of technology that we don't have in this culture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
I'm always amazed at what I can see with my weird imagination. And I try to always retain an element of dignity with the science being first, and Occam's razor, those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. Please ask Miller if we have alien technology. Yes, of course we do. I've looked at 2 artifacts, and whether or not they were alien or from previous civilizations, that part I'm not sure. I have seen things that are not from our civilization. Yes. And when I say that, it's metal. I had an artifact that was a superconductor. You could heat it with a torch and touch it. It would deflect all of the heat in a manner like a geodesic dome does with stress. And yet I hit it with a 50 caliber cannon. I did this study at the University of Chicago. It was, I don't know if this one was written up in that Veterans Today article. They did a big piece on my childhood where they vetted out all the things I did for the military. And it was even weirder than I thought it was. I had no idea at the time. That is how my future is affecting my behavior right now and literally changing my past. And if you want to get into the nature of time, basically the future is a secondary wave. You can discover that on physics.org, that the primary wave is your past. When you have a drop of water that hits a pool, you have the radiating waves that go outward from the drop that hits the water. That's called the future. And the waves that go inward and slap each other and form a cavitation ball is your past. And that's where it all is happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it seems to me like everything's happening simultaneously, which means everything is consciousness in motion.
There you go.
Yeah.
Into the out of, just like the
double
ganger and the second Earth and the and that's the difference between Stephen Hawking's and what we call white hole, black hole physics to be distinguished differently than Roger Penrose at Princeton and his torus twistor space with many black holes and space curving in on itself.
Right. What about the possibility of a wormhole? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Richard. No, I was going to ask.
Okay.
What about the possibility of a wormhole between the worlds? In other words, a wormhole between this point, and I've talked about this a little bit with CERN, but literally a connection between this planet and another one, perhaps in a extended version.
Okay. Yeah, that's what CERN is about.
Yeah, it sounds like it to me
Literally,
as well.
that's what CERN is about. It's going to create a rip in the fabric of space-time.
Well, I think it already has. And you know what's interesting, and I don't know if you correlated this or not, and I might have mentioned it to you before, but I've noticed that there's a spike in, obviously, volcanic eruptions as soon as they fired CERN up and started running different tests. I don't know if you noticed that or not.
Yeah, but this is all, again, directly related to what the sun is doing and causing all of this magma and shifting in the center of the Earth. It's actually way worse than people realize, and why the media is not actually discussing it, I have no idea. I don't get that. What I do get is how dare them keep me out of the loop, because that's what the military always thought I was the best at, is connecting dots. And I don't know, and my pay grade is obviously not high enough.
Well, the bottom line is we already know more probably than half of them know. So what's the difference now at this point in the continuum? I mean, really, seriously, Richard, there's so much going on right now. People are really starting to decipher a lot of data. So it's almost like these guys are the ones that are probably tracking you and other beings who are literally decoding stuff and following your work and not having to pay you. It's free information. I mean, literally, all they have to do is tag your freaking website or listen to your radio shows. This is what they do. I mean, it's just ridiculous, but don't get me started with them. But literally, I'm wondering how all this stuff is affecting people on an energetic scale. Obviously, we're energetic beings. We're multidimensional beings. So we have electromagnetic fields. So what's going on, do you think, that's happening to the body itself through this process?
Well, I think Zen Gardner nails it. And I like Zen Gardner and his types of writing where we have a choice and we're waking up. All of us are.
Right. Well, that makes sense. But what about physical ailments, anything like that, you think?
Well, the physical element would be your indigo children and all the hybrids that we're now starting to see in our children and grandchildren. It's remarkable what I'm discovering. And where these kids have a priori knowledge of stuff that there's no possible way they could have it from genetics.
No, but they're being engineered, and then you have to look at that aspect of it in the black technology.
Whatever that might mean. I did get to meet the guy that did the Star Child. What was his name? Lloyd Pye, before he died. And there's obvious we've had alien visitations. How could we not? I mean, with our imagination, how could aliens not be real?
Well, the thing is, Richard, we are star beings. I mean, that's our essence of origin. That's the soul's essence of origin. So you can look in the mirror and know that you're not from here, literally, in the illusion of. You can incarnate on this planet. Doesn't mean you're from here.
I get that a lot with my intellect.
No, I'm seriously.
Yeah,
that is exactly what we were supposed to be looking at on a multidimensional scale. I mean, just because we're here doesn't make us from here. And that's what people really need to be paying attention to. And now they're seeing the star seeds and everything else. Also, everything's speeding up through frequency and vibration. So that's part of the process of DNA activation and awakening. We all know that. And then, of course, there's the dabblers with the black technologies programs, which are using induction programs and acceleration. So we're heading for a break. We'll be right back, everybody. Please stay tuned. Dr. Richard Allen Miller.